Hello world, this is Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor from Johnson County Community College. The subject of this short screencast is refactoring, and that's simply a computer science term for improving your code. For example, it could be as simple as deleting your console logs once you know your code is working correctly. So here's a couple statements that I don't need anymore. I'm just going to delete them to make my code shorter and cleaner, and that's a type of refactoring. Sometimes when you're learning a new language and you see examples of well-written, elegant, refactored code, it's confusing because well-written, perfectly refactored code can be more confusing than writing out each step in a separate statement. So I developed this little example to show you the many different ways of getting this function to run. First way is just to assign that function name to the onclick property of every button that we want to run that function. And that's what I've done so far. And I'm running that same function, greeting, based on when I'm clicking the say hi to Lisa, say hi to Kristen, or say hi to Julia button, and pulling in the ID of that button to create my message and put that in this paragraph. But let's go down and see how I could refactor that code. One way to refactor that code, instead of seeing all this duplication of these statements, is to declare a constant called buttons and use my query selector all method to grab all of those buttons and put it in a node list. I'm going to comment out my three statements here and show you how that might work in a for loop. So instead of these three statements, I have one for loop that's looping over the buttons and adding the greeting function to its onclick property. I'm going to console log out my buttons just so that you can see what the query selector all method does. Save, refresh, and console log statement is showing right here. Buttons is a node list of all three of these buttons. And as I hover over them, you can also see the highlight in the upper portion of the screen. And let's see if our code still works. Yes, it does. So although that might not seem like a huge improvement for only three statements, what if I had 10 or 30 or 100 buttons? Then it would be a massive improvement. Let's refactor some more. I'm going to leave my const buttons so that my node list going, clear my console, and look at the forEach method. In this case, I'm taking that node list and I'm applying the forEach method and applying a function that does this statement. It takes in each button in the buttons node list, and for each button adds the greeting function to the onclick property. This word is actually a variable too. It could be anything. It could be X, and then of course if I declare it as X in my function argument list, I've got to use that same name in my code. But oftentimes it's just the singular version of whatever you're traversing in your array or your node list, which is a little bit more semantic, a little bit more meaningful. So I'll save, refresh. I still get my node list from line 28, and my buttons are still working and providing that same functionality to these three buttons. Let's go one step further. In JavaScript ES6, also called JavaScript 2015, we have an arrow function. And so instead of using the word function, this is called the arrow function. And it basically takes the arguments out in front of the arrow. And that means here's the arguments that go into this function, and then this statement is exactly the same. So this would be using the forEach method and an arrow function instead of the keyword function to do the exact same thing. Save, refresh, and my buttons are still working. I've got one more to show you. Here's that exact same thing, refactored, super beautiful on one line. I'll even do a B for button. So I'm taking my buttons node list. I'm using the forEach method, traversing across each item, each B in the buttons node list, and for each B in buttons, on its onclick property, I'm assigning that to the greeting function. Now, in the beginning, write your code as long as you want and as obvious as you want. And as long as it's solid, you can always worry about the refactoring later as you build your skills. But I think that's why sometimes it's hard as a new person coming into programming to learn this stuff, because when you traverse through the internet, you're going to find statements like this that don't make sense because you haven't seen the incremental steps. But hopefully this helped you learn a little bit about refactoring. Thank you.